everybody. Thanks so much for attending. Really appreciate it. Since I don't know some of you in the audience, I thought I would pick a topic that would hopefully be relevant to everybody. I'm not sure how many of you would be interested in a talk about how to raise money for a business or how to build your supply chain or a go-to-market strategy. And so rather than picking a specific business topic that would be relevant to a food company, I wanted to pick something maybe a little more philosophical that I think is relevant to all of us individually and to the businesses and or products and services that we offer in the world. So firstly, I just want to introduce myself. I'm the founder of the Meriwether Group. I founded the company 10 years ago, and our mission really is to serve the modern day hero, which we believe is the entrepreneur. And in particular, we really focus on food, beverage, and active lifestyle, a lot of which happens in our community here. And I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and my background, not because I am particularly proud of that, but I think it's relevant to maybe understanding how I've come to some of the thoughts and concepts I'm going to share with you today. So background-wise, as I mentioned, I started the Meriwether Group 10 years ago. I moved to Oregon in 1991 from Michigan with the idea that I wanted to be a lawyer. I had grown up in a sort of culturally Jewish home, and you had two options. You became a lawyer or became a doctor. And because I was squeamish, medicine really wasn't an option. So I thought, well, let me try to combine law with something that I maybe have a personal interest in, which is the environment, and came out to Lewis and Clark Northwestern School of Law, which has a really good program. Loved the study of law, didn't love the practice of law. Realized that billing time in 6-minute increments was not going to be a pathway to success or happiness for me. And during law school, my then girlfriend, now wife, Heather, had this brilliant creative idea to start a business. And it was a business called Oregon Chai, which some of you may have heard of. It really came as a result of time we had spent traveling together in Southeast Asia, and then also communities like Boulder and Telluride that we had spent time in. And we felt like the tea drinker, or even a coffee drinker who sometimes wanted to have tea, was sort of relegated to a hot mug of water and a bag of chamomile, and it just didn't feel as aspirational as the stuff Starbucks and others were doing. So we brewed up a pot of something called Oregon Chai, and again, it was really Heather's vision around the consumer and around that experience. And you know, she looked at me one day and said, I know exactly what to do with the product. I know the brand, I understand this consumer, but I don't want to have to worry about any of the other stuff. And I said, great, you know, I think I can help with that piece. So the business planning, the supply chain, the insurance, the things that have to go into running a successful business. And kind of unknowingly, we came together as this merger of sort of left brain and right brain, which I'm going to talk a lot more about today. And it worked, and the company was launched. It really, the consumer loved it. I think they felt the authenticity and the love and the product. Our tagline was Nirvana in a cup, and it was more than a tagline. It was really Heather's desire for a consumer in, you know, Iowa who might never leave their hometown, for that moment when they held a cup of Oregon Chai up to their mouth and breathed in the aroma and the exotic chai spices, for that moment they could be transported to the Himalayas. They could feel the experience of really tapping into that cultural and sort of emotional place. And it worked, it resonated. Again, a lesson, which I'll come back to. I also spent 8 years at Adidas, so with a large, iconic global brand, and learned a lot about brand and product and going to market, sales segmentation strategy, licensing, and how to grow a business. In 2004, after having grown Oregon Chai to a reasonable business, we decided it was time to exit. We felt we had taken the company as far as we could, and we knew that further growth was going to require a different set of management and risk and capital, and also some decisions that we didn't necessarily want to make on our watch. And so we made the decision to sell the company, and very grateful that we had a successful exit, not only for us, but also for many others who worked in the company all the way down to the warehouse. And that led to the founding of the Meriwether Group. So I appreciate your patience, but I think you'll find that the background is important. The Meriwether Group really, as I mentioned, works with the best, and I'm so grateful, iconic, growing, disruptive consumer brands. And when I say disruptive, we really define that in two ways. Either creating a new category where one has never existed, there was no chai category, or looking at categories that are tired and complacent and are in need of either evolution or revolution. And Dave's Killer Breads would be a great example of a company that has done that. You know, you look at the bread category, and maybe pun intended, but it's very stale. And along came Dave with a revolutionary new way to bring bread to market, and as a result, the consumer really adopted it. And we have the great fortune of working with these companies, you know, some of whom are here today. Franz from Laughing Planet, which is an incredible, as we all know, great restaurant, but it's so much more than a restaurant. You know, I mentioned to Franz this morning that my wife picked up some Laughing Planet last night, and she said, you know, I love Laughing Planet. It just saves my butt all the time. You know, when we don't have a dinner plan or can't figure out what to do, it's just a healthy, fun, authentic way to feed yourself or your family. Matt with Water Avenue Coffee, who's out front, who's really put, you know, love and passion into roasting, and also has a barista training school, which is training the next wave of great baristas globally. Bunk Sandwich Bars, and my good friend Tommy, who's going to be speaking later today, who just does amazing things with sandwiches. You know, sandwiches are sort of uniquely American, and to do what he's done with farm to table and creativity in a sandwich is amazing. And obviously our friends from Voodoo, who are also clients, and their generous gift this morning, so we could all have some tasty, sugary treats to hopefully keep you awake while I drone on. So, you know, these are just some of the great companies we have the really amazing pleasure of working with. And, you know, Eric said this morning that on this stage are going to be some luminaries today. I truly don't think of myself as even anywhere close to a luminary. The luminaries are these business owners and these entrepreneurs, folks like you who are birthing these businesses and companies in the food space. I just have the pleasure of supporting those luminaries. It really is what it's about at the Meriwether Group. Let's see if I can get this to go to the next slide. Yeah. So I'm going to move really quickly through this. I talked about it a bit last year for those who were here. I just want to say a few words on it, which is, you know, at the Meriwether Group, what we've done is taken Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey. And for those of you who don't know Joseph Campbell, it's probably worth spending a little bit of time to get to know his work. He died in the 80s. He was the foremost authority on mythology. We've all read myth at various points in our life. Maybe college was the last time. And what Campbell basically said is mythology is something more than just a collection of great stories. They're instructive. They're meant to help us, to teach us, to show patterns in our way, in our life, and they can be a roadmap for how we live our lives. They're the hard questions that we all struggle with as human beings, contextualized into story. And in his work, he said there was one myth, an uber myth, that has been in every culture, every spiritual belief system, all geography, and all time. It's pretty powerful, and it's called The Hero's Journey. So his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, outlines that myth. It's very formulaic. It always follows the same trajectory. It is the basis of Star Wars. It's the basis of Avatar, of The Wizard of Oz, and many, many, many others. There's a YouTube video where George Lucas says Star Wars did what it did in the world not because the animation or acting. I told the hero's journey, and it tapped into the collective consciousness. So one of the things I'd like you guys to take away is there is instruction, there are roadmaps out there, and they're not always in a business book or a lecture, but they're in the great myths that are part of our history. In the hero's journey, which again is always formulaic, you have this hero, this reluctant hero. Frankly, everyone sitting in this room. There's a calling, a desire to do something more, and that calling is in you. For most of us, unfortunately, we do whatever we can to quiet that voice. It's disruptive. It wants us to change things. It's not willing to accept the status quo. That voice doesn't like us living in what Campbell called the known world, Dorothy's Kansas. It wants us to go to Oz. It wants us to venture out. And if you heed your call, you will leave the known world and enter the unknown world, and you're in Oz. Again, always the same formula. So you land in Oz, you're Luke Skywalker, you leave your little planet, you join the Rebel Force, the list goes on. You're an executive at Nike, you decide to leave because you've always wanted to bird this new gluten-free cookie company. And initially you're pretty euphoric, but then pretty quickly that wears off and you realize, oh my God, what have I done? You know, I've got a mortgage and kids going to college and I don't know the first thing about supply chain or margin or, you know, I had a good idea, I like this cookie. What have I done? You know, and you hit what Campbell calls the abyss. So this is Dorothy realizing that her house has landed on a witch, and all the singing and dancing and little Oompa Loompa people or lollipop kids, whatever they're called, that ends pretty quickly in a puff of green smoke, and the witch says, you know, I'm going to get you, my pretty. And she's just a little girl from Kansas with a dog in a basket. She's not really equipped to deal with that. And what Campbell says and mythology says is it's at that point, the point of the abyss, where the mentors and guides show up. Your Obi-Wan, your Yoda, your Fellowship of the Ring. You know, they come, and they do. They just do. And, you know, we can now or at some other point reflect on this in your own life. You know, the Buddhist saying that the teacher appears when the student's ready. The abyss has the ability to sort of cause us to be in a place of surrender, to finally let ego go, to really sort of drop to our knees and say, you know what, I need some help. I don't know what I'm doing here, I'm lost. And while it feels like the worst place, it's actually where creativity is at its highest and where potentiality is at its highest. It's where we have the ability to manifest our intentions, our dreams. The guides show up, the mentors show up, and they help you in what Campbell calls the transformation. So literally the yellow brick road, the path. Along the way, there are flying monkeys and other things that are going to enter your world, and the mentors and guides are there to help you. If you recall, there was a Tin Man, a Scarecrow, and a Lion. The three things they were looking for in The Wizard of Oz were heart, brains, and courage. It's usually those three things or a couple others. And then you reach your defining moment, and that can be different for all of us. Our defining moment is different, but the end result is typically the same, which is there is no wizard behind the curtain. There never was a wizard behind the curtain. And someone helps you to realize, like Glinda the Good Witch for Dorothy did, silly girl, it's been you all the time. All you had to do was click your heels together 3 times. You possess the power. The divinity is within you. The hero is you. It's not someone behind the curtain. Now, you couldn't have realized that when you were in Kansas or at Nike. You probably couldn't have realized it when you finally went to Oz or started your company. You certainly didn't feel it when you were in the abyss. You might have started to get a sense of it during your transformation, but at the end you recognize it, and it's clear. And then you return to the known world, and the world is better, and you are better for having taken the journey. So our goal at the Meriwether Group, and our mantra is fulfill your journey. And it's our goal to help luminaries, birthers of creativity, heroes on their path, to do what we can do to support them, to take the lessons we've learned having traveled our own path and hopefully be able to provide some insight to you along yours. So when I was introduced, it was mentioned that I had written a book. It's difficult for me to say that I wrote a book. It's really, I captured maybe, hopefully, some of what is in the collective consciousness and reduced it into a book. It really isn't me writing anything. You know, there's this great Sufi poet named Hafiz who wrote, I'm just a hole in a flute through which the universe's breath blows. Listen to the music. And, you know, maybe I can be a hole in a flute, and some of this that happens to be flowing through me will make some sense. So the book is here, and the first 20 copies have been signed by me if anyone would like to read it. So I'll continue. So I'm going to move really quickly through this. So we've talked about heeding your call, which is the name of the book, really stepping out of the known world, moving into the unknown world, the fact that you're going to have to go through a place of abyss and surrender, and then a couple of the tools. You notice that during the tools of transformation, These are where we learn and adopt from our mentors and guides and from our own soul, our own self, the tools we need to help us reach our defining moment. Some of those, and there are 11 of them that are outlined in the book, Heed Your Call, are practicing empathy and learning how to integrate. And you see this image on the far right side about the brain. And what I'm going to do with the rest of our time is talk about a couple of these tools that I think are particularly helpful to people who are in any business, but certainly the business of food. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food. It's critical. We don't survive without it. And it touches, as Eric mentioned, every part of our lives and our world. So you guys are at the apex of really what is driving the human condition and society, the environment, and culture, which is really powerful. So we invent the future by fulfilling our journey. This is going to be maybe a little bit out there for some, but I truly believe that the way you repair the world, the way we heal the world, is not through government regulation or even necessarily through traditional philanthropic activity, but it's about doing what you're supposed to do. As the Buddhists would call it, your dharma. Living your purpose. When you live from that place, it has a healing effect on you and on others around you and generally the world. By really heeding your call, by doing what you're meant to do in the world, you can create profound change. It's what myth tells us, and it's what I know personally in my life. We can invent the future. It starts with leaving the known world and leaping. So this is something I want to spend a little time on because I think my intuition tells me it'll be relevant to some of us here in the audience. So traditionally, we are taught, unfortunately, in our schools and maybe even in our homes, that you have to choose what we call the tyranny of or, that you're either a left brain person or you're a right brain person. And I'll use Portland as an example. If you're a right brain person, you live on the east side, you're a poet or a creative or a brilliant sort of musician, you have a fixie bike, you sleep on a futon, you carry a medical marijuana card even though you don't need one necessarily, you are super culturally attuned, a lot of meaning and purpose in your life, you know all the great food carts, you have a really close-knit group of friends, a lot of just deep empathy and intuition, you tap into that on a daily basis, but you don't have a passport or you've lost it, you're broke, your big vacation is going to be illegally camping on the Oregon coast, and that's your life. Or we're told you live on the west side and you're a left brain person. You drive a German car, you belong to the Mountain Athletic Club, you have a house in Black Butte, you go to Kona every February, you got a bunch of dough in the bank, but you have very little meaning and purpose in your life. Your relationships aren't very strong. You don't know where the good restaurants are. You may go to like Applebee's, and you certainly probably aren't at this conference, or if you are, you're doing so with a little insecurity. And the reality is, that's a lie. That is a lie, and it is not what the future needs or requires of us. We need to be both. We need to be and in our lives and in our businesses. We need to be people who can toggle back and forth between, you got to get up in the morning and set your alarm clock. Yes, you need to balance your checkbook. Yes, it's important for a business or enterprise to have a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement. But you also have to use intuition and empathy. You have to understand your consumer and understand them deeply. You have to be able to tap into your heart and soul. And then you have to marry that back with best practices. And you have to have a handbook if you have a certain amount of employees. You have to have both. And when you do, the magic happens. So Oregon Chai, unknowingly, is this. We had a passionate founder, my wife, who was absolutely brilliant in her understanding of what the consumer wanted and needed. I was told by my grandfather that genius is nothing more than knowing what the collective consciousness wants 10 minutes before they know they want it. And a lot of you are genius, and that's amazing. But then you also have to prop that up with people who can assist you with logic and analytics and best practices and real blocking and tackling on the business side. It's not or, it's and. And that's true when you capitalize your business. You know, one of my great frustrations here in Portland is you'll see an article in the Willamette Week or Mercury about we can't attract outside capital, we can't grow our homespun businesses, we don't have jobs. You know, why is that? Why is that? And then we have an amazing situation like we've had over the last couple years where world-class private equity groups who have never looked at Oregon come in and make investments in our companies like Dave's Killer Breads and Stumptown Coffee and others, which, you know, I'm very proud to have been part of. And you see an article the next week, Dave's Killer Bread sells out, Stumptown sold out. You know, it's that or. It's a lie. It's not real. It's not the future. These things can come together in a very heart-centered way where there's high watermark economics and a lot of allegiance and, frankly, support and respect and adherence to the DNA and soul of a business. And so, again, if there's another thing you take away from today, it's that and is the future. Apple Computer is the most valuable company in the history of enterprise and now the most recognizable brand. And I'll ask you guys, is Apple Computer a technology company or a really beautiful consumer brand? It's both. And that's why. Intel, and I apologize if there's any Intel people in the office or in the auditorium, is a left brain engineering company. They are an ingredient, not really an and. And as a result, they have a fraction of the enterprise value or market cap of Apple. The future belongs to those who can embrace and. So, you know, a couple examples, and I've spoken about some of these already, so I'm going to move quickly, is, you know, Voodoo Donuts. I mean, what an amazing company we have here in our community and now in Denver and others, where, you know, they're innovating, they're creating really interesting, disruptive products. Certainly you get a brand experience. You know, they're musicians, they marry people outside of their store. You know, it's about as Portland as you get. But there's a real business behind it. You know, and there was a recent Willamette article, and it sort of was a little bit, I felt, had a little bit of a negative connotation to it, like, hey, don't really believe that these guys are just about making really cool, fun donuts. They actually want to have a profitable business. Duh. Yeah, of course they do. You know, we all use this word sustainability, which is, by the way, a word I don't like at all. I mean, do you want to have a sustainable relationship with your children? You want to have a great relationship. You know, it's a weak word. But so let's have businesses that are heart-centered and profitable. And let's live our lives that way because we can. So Oregon Chai we've talked about. That's it for me, guys. And now I'll leave it to you if you have any questions for me.